Good evening, and welcome back to Candlelit History. Tonight we are going somewhere we have never dared to go before. Not to a village, not to an inn on a rainy road, but to the largest, brightest, most famous house in the world. And we are going there for the one thing nobody ever associates with it: sleep. It is a spring evening in the year 1705, and on a low hill 12 miles west of Paris, the Palace of Versailles is beginning very slowly to think about going to bed. 10,000 people will sleep tonight within its walls and courtyards and attics and stables, more people than most towns in France can count, and every one of them, from the greatest duke to the boy who turns the spit in the farthest kitchen, will be put to bed by a machine of custom and candlelight so vast, so precise, and so strange that nothing like it has ever existed before or since. The sun is going down behind the long canal in the gardens, laying a road of gold across the water, exactly as the men who planned these gardens intended it to do, for this is the Palace of the Sun King, and even the sunset here has been arranged. The light climbs the great western front of the palace as it fades, hundreds of tall windows catching fire one by one, glass by glass, and then letting the fire go one by one, until the stone turns the color of cooling ash and the first true candles appear behind the panes, small, warm human lights in a front so long that a walker beneath it takes 5 whole minutes to pass from one end to the other. Inside, in 1,000 rooms, the evening is being lit. Footmen move down the galleries with long wax tapers, touching flame to chandelier after chandelier, and behind them the mirrors. This palace has more mirrors than the rest of France together. Take each new candle and double it again, until a single flame becomes a constellation. There is a smell that belongs to this hour and no other. Beeswax warming, wood fires freshly fed, orange blossom drifting in from the orangery below the south terrace, and under it all, the faint green breath of the gardens, box hedge, gravel, fountain water cooling after the warm day. Listen, and you can hear the palace changing shifts. The day was for glory, petitions and processions, ambassadors and architects, the crunch of 10,000 shoes on gravel. The night is for something else, something quieter, and in its way more wonderful. Because the strangest secret of Versailles, the thing the guidebooks and the histories almost never tell you, is this: the most public building on earth had to sleep like anybody else. The gilded doors had to be locked, the fires had to be banked, the 10,000 had to be fed, watered, lit to bed, and watched over until morning. Somebody had to hold the candle, and so tonight, for one whole night, we are going to stay behind when the daylight visitors leave. We will stand in the crowd at the king's own bedtime, a bedtime so famous that dukes compete for the honor of holding his candlestick. We will follow the servants up their hidden stairs and the guard on his midnight round through the hall of mirrors, and we will walk out under the stars to hear what the greatest gardens in the world sound like when every fountain has been turned off and the statues stand alone in the moonlight. Nothing frightening will happen, nothing sad. The palace has seen grief and will see more, but not tonight. Tonight is one of the 10,000 ordinary nights, the kind history forgets precisely because nothing went wrong. So settle back, let your own candle burn low, and come up the hill with the last of the light. The gates are still open, the king has not yet gone up to bed, and the first star is out over the canal. Before we go in, stand a moment at the golden gates and let the place introduce itself, because even the walls here have a story, and it is a stranger story than you might think. Versailles was never supposed to be this, within living memory, and there are old men in the kitchens tonight who remember it. This was a marsh and a modest hunting lodge, a little brick and stone box where the old king, this king's father, came to fly his hawks and be left alone. Then the young Louis, the 14th of that name, took his father's hunting box and did to it what the tide does to a sandcastle in reverse. He built and built and kept building, wing upon wing, terrace upon terrace, for 40 years and more, until the lodge disappeared inside a palace, the way a seed disappears inside an oak. 23 years ago now, in 1682, he did the unthinkable and moved the entire government of France here, court and council and all, out of Paris, away from the crowded, muttering, dangerous city he had never quite trusted since the riots of his boyhood. And where the king goes, everyone must go. So tonight, sleeping under this one roof and its outbuildings is not merely a household but a capital. Ministers and secretaries, dukes and duchesses, abbots, ambassadors, doctors, librarians, musicians, guards, grooms, gardeners, clockmakers, chocolate makers, water carriers, floor polishers, a whole nation in miniature, folded into one building like a fleet folded into one harbour. The arithmetic of it stops the mind gently, the way large, soft numbers do at bedtime. Somewhere near 10,000 souls, all told, counting the town pressing up to the gates. The palace serves by the reckoning of its own kitchens, some 15,000 meals on a great day. There are said to be over 2,000 windows, 1,200 fireplaces and mirrors past counting, and every window pane and every hearth and every mirror is, tonight, somebody's responsibility. That is the word to hold on to all through tonight, responsibility. From the outside, Versailles looks like a boast, and it is one. It was built to awe Europe, and Europe is duly awed. But from the inside, at nightfall, it is something much more soothing. It is the world's largest rota. Every candle that will burn tonight has been counted out by the officers of the wax. Every door that will be locked has its named keeper, and the keeper has his named hour. Every fire has its boy. The king himself, the Sun King, the most absolute monarch in Christendom, lives inside this rota more tightly than anyone, his entire day nailed to the clock, so predictably that it is said you can be anywhere in Europe with an almanac and a good watch and know exactly what he is doing at this minute. It is 8 in the evening now, and the almanac says the king is at cards. Through the tall lit windows of the state apartments, if you stand on tiptoe out here on the terrace, you can see the glow of it. 3 evenings a week the king throws open his grandest rooms to the court for music and gaming and refreshments. They call it simply apartment, said R-part-R-MAWN, and tonight is such an evening. Green baize tables under the chandeliers, pyramids of oranges and sugared fruit, 100 candles in one room, 200 in the next. The clink of coins and the small laughter of people being careful because the king is present, strolling from table to table with that unhurried walk the whole world imitates. Up there, glory is still awake. But we are not going up, not yet. Because at this same hour, under our feet and behind the walls, the other Versailles, the one that makes the glowing one possible, is already beginning its night's work. And that is the Versailles this channel loves best. Come around the south wing, past the sentry in his blue and silver, through a low door the tourists of later centuries will walk straight past. Mind the step. The corridor is narrow, the ceiling low, the walls plain whitewash. One tallow candle burns in a tin sconce. We have left the palace of the Sun King and entered the palace of everyone else. This narrow corridor is a vein in the palace's hidden circulation, and at this hour it is busy the way a beehive is busy, everyone moving, nobody hurrying, everybody known. A footman passes us with a dozen fresh candles laid across his arms like a sheaf of white wheat. A maid goes the other way with a copper warming pan, its lid clicking softly at each step. Somewhere overhead we can hear the evening party as a murmur through the floor, like weather happening in another country. The people of this corridor have a name for the grand rooms above. They call them simply up there. Up there wants lemonade. Up there has broken a glass. Up there will be going to bed at 10. And everything that happens in this palace between now and then happens so that up there may do so without ever once wondering how. Follow the smell of bread and roasting meat, down a stair, across a paved yard where the evening air is suddenly cool, and into the building that feeds the machine. The Grand Commun, said Grand Commun. It stands just south of the palace proper, a huge square block around its own courtyard, and it is one of the wonders of France that nobody ever paints. 5 floors of kitchens, larders, pantries, offices, and above them the small rooms where hundreds of the palace's servants sleep. If the palace is a ship, this is the galley and the crew deck, and at 8:30 in the evening it is at full steam. The kitchens here cook not for the king, his food has its own kitchens, its own officers, its own solemn procession, but for the court, the tables of the ladies in waiting, the almoners, the secretaries, the officers of the guard, table after table, sitting after sitting. Under these vaulted ceilings, in the light of fires and hanging lamps, an army works in shirt sleeves, cooks at the great hearths where whole rows of fowl turn on spits, boys basting, scullions scouring copper with sand and lemon until it glows like the mirrors upstairs, pastry cooks sliding tarts from ovens on long wooden peels, the pot boilers, the sauce makers, the bread counters, the men whose entire office, a real office with a real title, is the king's roast. Steam rolls along the ceiling and out the high windows into the night. The noise is tremendous and somehow restful. Clatter, hiss, the thump of dough, the squeak of the spit chains, a man singing 2 rooms away. And through it all walks the head steward of the evening with his staff of office, unhurried, tasting, nodding, the very image of a man who has done this 10,000 times. Here is a thing to fall asleep on. The accounts of this house record that the court and household consume, in a single ordinary day, something on the order of 1,500 pounds of beef, as much again of mutton, veal by the calf, and fowl by the 100, eggs in thousands, and bread, always bread in quantities that keep a village of bakers baking around the clock. None of it is wasted, whatever the pamphleteers in Paris say. What leaves the great tables feeds the lower tables, and what leaves the lower tables is sold at the palace gate to dealers who cry it through the town, so that a labourer in Versailles town may sup at one remove on a dish that was set before a duchess. The palace digests everything. At the long tables in the servants' hall, the first sitting of the household supper is underway. Soup, boiled beef, wine thinned with water, and the day's gossip, which is better than the wine. Who was given the candlestick last night? Whose lackey quarrelled with whose coachman? Whether the fountains will play on Sunday for the ambassadors? We could stay all night in this warm, loud, generous room, but above us a bell has begun to ring, small and silvery and insistent, and every head in the hall lifts for a moment, the way sailors lift their heads at a change in the wind. It is the signal the whole building has been cooking toward. 10 o'clock is coming. The king's supper is about to be served, and the king sups in public, before the eyes of whoever wishes to watch. Up there is about to perform the second last ceremony of its enormous day, and we have a place, if we go now, standing at the back, in the shadow by the door. Up a back stair, along a gallery, and suddenly the ceiling lifts away, and we are in marble again, among candles again, in the first antechamber of the king's apartment, where a crowd is gathering in the pleasantest possible state of mind, the state of people about to watch somebody else eat supper. This is the grand couvert, said Grand Couvert, the great cover, the king's public evening meal, and it is one of the most extraordinary ordinary things in the world. 3 or 4 nights a week, the King of France sits down at a small square table, alone or with the princes and princesses of his blood, and eats his supper in front of an audience. Anyone decently dressed may come and watch. Tonight there are courtiers in silk, officers, a country gentleman and his wife, who have clearly travelled for this. She is memorizing everything. You can see it, storing the candlelight to tell her neighbours for the rest of her life, and us, at the back, in the shadow by the door, where this channel always stands. The table is laid with a cloth of blinding white. The royal dishes come up from the king's own kitchen across the street. Yes, across a street. The food of the King of France crosses a public road every night of its life, carried in procession by officers with staves, announced at each doorway, the dishes covered in silver, and every cover lifted and every dish tasted before it comes anywhere near the royal table. An old ceremony of caution from rougher centuries, performed tonight with the calm of men who have never once found anything wrong. The king eats famously, magnificently. His appetite is one of the sights of Europe. Soup, and then more soup, whole birds, ham, salad by the bowlful, pastry, fruit, and he does it all with a neatness that the memoir writers marvel at, barely using the newfangled fork, moving through the courses with the same unhurried competence he brings to everything, while the crowd files quietly past and the ushers murmur, "Keep moving, gentlemen, keep moving." And here is the thing you notice, standing in the shadow. It is not really about the food at all. It is a ritual of reassurance, performed nightly. France comes to the door of this room and sees with its own eyes. The king is here, the king is well. The king eats among us like a father at the head of an enormous table. Nothing is wrong in the kingdom, says the ham. All is in order, say the silver covers. You may all sleep soundly, says the salad. Say what you like about the vanity of courts, and the pamphleteers say plenty. There are worse ceremonies for a country to build its evening around. Watch the faces along the wall while the king eats. There is the old duke who dined here in the rain's first springtime, 40 years ago, nodding gently now over his stick. There are the pages, 12 and 13 years old, rigid with the effort of not being boys. There, half behind a taller colleague, is a young officer of the bodyguard on his first week of duty, watching the king with an expression you will see nowhere else on earth. The look of a man guarding something he has heard about his entire life. And there at the back, in plain dark clothes, stand the men whose night is about to begin. The first valet of the bedchamber, and beside him the garçons bleus, said garçons bleus, the blue boys, the king's own chamber servants in their blue livery, quiet as candles not yet littered. They are not watching the king eat. They are watching the meal's progress the way a ferryman watches the tide, because when the fruit is finished and the napkin is lifted, their tide comes in. The king rises. The room rises with him, chairs and heels and silk all at once, a sound like a wave drawing back off shingle. He stands a moment, bows to the princesses, says a word to somebody that will keep that somebody warm for a month, and then he walks, at that famous unhurried pace, through the parting crowd, out of the supper room, trailed by the great and followed at a distance by the quiet men in blue. It is 11:15. The most famous bedtime in the world is about to begin. The king's bedchamber at Versailles sits at the exact center of the palace, on the axis of the rising sun. Of course it does. Everything here means something, and by the time the king reaches it, the room is full. Full at bedtime. This is the coucher, said coucher, the ceremony of the king's going to bed, and admission to it is one of the most precisely rationed privileges in France. The room is not large as staterooms go, and it holds tonight perhaps 100 men, only men, at this hour arranged by rank as strictly as organ pipes, princes of the blood, nearest the balustrade that rails off the great bed, then dukes, then officers of the crown, then the merely noble, back to the merely fortunate at the door. The bed itself stands behind its gilded rail like an altar behind a screen, crimson and gold, plumed at the corners, so tall and grave that visitors have been known to bow to it even when the king is nowhere near, and indeed that is the custom. One salutes the king's bed as one salutes the altar in a church, empty or not. The ceremony unfolds in an order fixed as the stars. The king's collar is unfastened by one officer entitled to unfasten it. His coat is received by another entitled to receive it. The royal shirt, this is the great moment, the fresh nightshirt is handed along a chain of the highest-ranking men in the room, hand to hand like a relic, until it reaches the person of the very highest rank present, who alone has the honor of presenting it to the king. Men have sulked for a week over losing their place in that chain. And then comes the moment the whole room has been waiting for, the moment we came for. On a side table stands a candlestick, a plain enough thing, 2 branches, nothing to look at. As the ceremony closes, the first valet approaches the king and murmurs, and the king looks out over the crowded candlelit room, 100 faces, everyone arranged into perfect unconcern, every heart behind every face beating a little faster, and he speaks one name. That is all. One name, quite quietly. And the man whose name it is steps forward, removes his glove, and is handed the candlestick, and holds it burning beside the king for the little that remains of the ceremony. He holds a candle. That is the entire privilege. He holds it for a few minutes, and everyone watches him hold it, and tomorrow everyone will know he held it. The memoir writers of this court who miss nothing tell us grown men, dukes, marshals of France have gone home sick with disappointment on nights the name was not theirs, and walked on air for days when it was. Ambassadors report the candlestick to their governments. It is, when you stop and think about it, by your own candle at home, one of the most human things in this whole gilded machine. The most powerful man in the world, at his bedtime, like any grandfather among grandchildren, chooses who gets to help, and the choosing, because it costs him nothing and cannot be bought, has become the purest currency in France. Tonight the name belongs to an elderly marquis from the south, a man of no great fortune who has attended this ceremony, someone whispers, for 30 years. Watch him step forward, the careful bow, the removed glove, the 2 branches of flame steadying in his hand after the first tremor. His face is a lesson in the containment of joy. For the rest of his life, this. The prayers are said. A chaplain reads the evening office quietly at the head of the bed. The king is in his nightshirt now, seated in the great chair while his hair is dressed for the night. The room begins on cue to empty by precedence, reversing the morning's order, rank by rank, bowing out backward through the doors. The candles seem to burn softer, and the marquis, at the proper moment, surrenders his candlestick to the first valet, bows lower than a young man could, and backs out of the chamber into the rest of his life. The doors close, and now the room performs its last transformation of the day, from a state chamber holding 100 men to what every bedroom on earth is at midnight, a dim, warm room with one person in it getting sleepy. Not quite one person, in truth. And here is a secret worth carrying down into sleep. The King of France is never alone. Not at supper, not at prayers, not at midnight. Not once in his long life has he been alone in the sense that you and I are alone when we close our door. When the last duke has backed out of the bedchamber, there remains the small night establishment, the first valet, whose narrow bed is set up at the foot of the king's own, inside the balustrade, where he will sleep lightly, professionally, within arm's reach of his master all night. And in the outer rooms, the blue boys taking up their stations, and the bodyguard at the doors, changed on the quiet hours. The candle by the great bed is left burning, a single flame in a room built for 100, and the fire is banked down to that deep rose glow we have watched in so many hearths together on this channel, the glow of a fire put to bed rather than put out. The first valet makes his last round of the chamber on stocking feet, shutters fast, night table furnished, the king's watch wound and laid flat, the little dog, yes, there is a little dog, there is always a little dog curled in its basket by the warm stones of the hearth. Then he lies down on his cot at the foot of the most famous bed in Europe, within the rail, under the gilded canopy's shadow, and becomes what he is paid and honored to be, the human latch on the door of the king's sleep. Outside the doors, the night watch of the bodyguard settles into its long stillness, and let us give these men a minute, because they belong to the brotherhood this channel has been collecting all year. The watchmen of the medieval village, the innkeeper on his last round, the lighthouse keeper on the gallery, and now the king's guard in the dim gallery of Versailles. Big men from good families in blue coats laced with silver, halberds grounded, standing where their fathers stood. Their orders have not changed in a generation. Nobody passes after the coucher but the named, the first valet, the reader if the king cannot sleep, the doctor if he is sent for. The guard knows every board in this floor by its voice. He knows the difference between a shutter loose in the wind and a footstep 3 rooms away, between the palace's ordinary night crackle, all that gilt and panelling, breathing out the day's warmth, and a sound that wants looking into. In 40 years of nights, this post has almost never heard a sound that wanted looking into. That is the entire triumph of the arrangement. An empire's worth of ceremony, 100 men at a bedtime, a guard on every stair, all of it so that one aging man in a nightshirt who has been performing since he was 4 years old can do the one thing no one can do for him: listen at the door. It is permitted tonight to us. The fire ticks. The little dog sighs. The first valet's breathing has already found its slow night rhythm. And beneath those sounds presently comes another, deep, even, unhurried, the breathing of the Sun King asleep. 66 years old, king for 62 of them. He has buried his ministers and his rivals and too many of his children. He has built this impossible house and filled it and ruled half a century of evenings in it. And now, like the ferryman after the last crossing, like the innkeeper after the last bolt, he has handed the kingdom to the night shift. France can manage without him until 7. The candle by the bed burns on it will burn till morning. A king's candle is never snuffed, and its small light falls on the gilded rail and the sleeping valet and the enormous quiet room, and holds them the way the arch lantern held the inn-yard, the way the lighthouse held the sea. One flame, minding the center of the world. And now, while the center sleeps, the rest of this enormous house is putting itself to bed around him, floor by floor, candle by candle, and that slow extinguishing, room by golden room, is the loveliest thing Versailles does in any 24 hours, and nobody ever sees it. We shall see it. Come out into the gallery. The Hall of Mirrors at midnight is a sight given to almost no one, and tonight it is given to us. By day, this gallery is the most crowded room in Europe. 240 feet of marble and gold, 17 great arched windows facing 17 great arched mirrors, the whole court parading beneath painted ceilings, while petitioners press along the walls and the light comes in off the gardens like surf. Now, nothing. The chandeliers have been lowered on their pulleys, their hundreds of candles snuffed by the men of the wax, with their long-handled snuffers pinch, 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 working down each branch as methodically as gardeners deadheading roses, and hauled back up to hang dark and glittering faintly like frozen fountains. The only light left is what the night itself brings through those 17 windows, moonlight, lying along the parquet in 17 pale lozenges, and the mirrors giving it back softly 17 more times. The gallery has doubled itself into darkness. Stand in the middle, and the silence has a texture you can almost stroke, the deep hush of a vast room built entirely of hard, shining things, all of them cooling. The parquet ticks somewhere down by the far end. A draught no stronger than a breath moves along the floor. This gallery is famous for its draughts. The courtiers complain of them all winter and finds its way out under a door. High above, the painted king in his painted chariot rides on through his painted victories, colorless now in the dark, a dream the ceiling is having. And down the very center of the floor, small and warm and mortal, comes a single point of gold, the night round. A guard of the bodyguard, making his slow transit of the gallery with a candle lantern, as a guard has done every night since these mirrors were hung. His heels ring quietly. He does not trouble to soften them. The sound is part of the office. the palace's pulse being taken, and mirror after mirror picks up his little flame and hands it silently along, so that one man with one candle walks the length of the hall, accompanied by 17 faint reflections of himself, a procession of one. He pauses at the middle window, as one likes to think every night guard here has always paused, because the view is owed a pause. The gardens below, silver and geometric under the moon, the parterres drawn in ink, the great canal a bar of pale light laid across the sleeping country all the way to the horizon, 12 miles east, invisible, Paris 500,000 sleepers. Around him, upstairs and down, the 10,000 of Versailles, all of it as quiet as the bottom of a lake. He moves on. The lantern light slides off the last mirror, wobbles once along the gilded frames, and folds itself away through the guardroom door. And the gallery returns to its long conversation with the moon. Let us follow the spirit of that little flame downward, through the floors, and watch the house put itself out. In the state apartments, the fires are banked and screened, the shutters barred by the closing officers with their soft ritual thunder, room after room. In the attics of the great wings, the candles are going out faster. Servants sleep early because they rise early, each small window up under the roofline going dark with a suddenness that is almost merry. Done, says each one. Done, done. In the grand Commun, the kitchens bank their ranges at last, rake the coals, cover them, and the great vaulted rooms that roared all evening settle into red-eyed quiet, one scullion asleep already on the warm bricks by the bread oven, where the head cook will find him at 4 and pretend not to have seen. Along the town front, the windows of ministers burn. Latest France's paperwork never quite sleeps, but even these, toward 1 o'clock, yield. A secretary sands his last page. A candle is carried away from a desk. A shutter closes. Somewhere a violin that has been practicing very softly behind an attic window for an hour plays one last phrase twice, satisfied, and stops. And then the palace of 10,000 people holds only the lights that are meant to burn till morning, the lanterns of the guardrooms spaced down the long fronts like anchor lights, the lamp at the great gates, and behind one tall window at the exact center of everything, the small steady star of the king's night candle, which is never put out. Count the lights that remain. You can do it on 2 hands. The brightest house in the world has become one of the darkest, and it is beautiful past all its daytime gold. Now let us climb where the daylight visitors never climb, up the narrow back stairs past the 3rd landing, into the roof itself, the attic country of Versailles, where the palace keeps its people. It is a whole hidden town up here, running for hundreds of feet under the great lead roofs, low corridors lit at long intervals by a lamp in a niche, doors and doors and doors, each with its chalked name or its little card. Behind each one, a room hardly bigger than the bed it holds. Here sleep the chambermaids and the footmen, the hairdressers and the pastry cook's boys, the under-librarian, the woman who irons the fine linens, the boy who winds the clocks of the north wing. The grand apartments below have 17-foot ceilings. Up here you can touch the beams, and in August it bakes, and in January the water freezes in the jugs, and the memoirists who lived it grumble about it for pages, and yet, ask the girl from a Norman farm who shares the 3rd room on the left, and she will tell you she sleeps at Versailles in the king's own house, and her granddaughter will be told it, and her granddaughter's granddaughter. Some of the small rooms hold treasures, a good mirror, cracked, retired from a stateroom and carried up 5 flights, a scrap of tapestry doing duty as a bed rug, woven with one silk pheasant that was once part of a hunting scene the length of a wall. The palace sheds downward, and its people gather what falls. Listen along the corridor, the sounds of any sleeping street. A cough, a rope bed creaking as someone turns, 2 voices murmuring through a partition, one laughing once softly. The wind, which up here under the roof is a constant companionable presence, breathing across 100 feet of lead sheeting, humming in the forest of chimney stacks, finding the loose tile it visits every night. And beneath everything, so low you feel it more than hear it, the great building itself, timbers the size of ships' masts settling by a hair's breadth, plaster and gilt and marble exhaling the day. An old palace at night talks to itself exactly like an old ship. We have heard this before, you and I, in the hold of an Indiaman and above the taproom of a coaching inn. The same slow creaks, the same sense of a vast wooden creature breathing around its sleepers. In one small room near the stair, a candle still burns. Through the cracked door, a chambermaid, perhaps 20, sits on her bed in her shawl, writing a letter on a board across her knees, slowly, forming each word first with her lips. She is writing home to that farm in Normandy, to a mother who will walk it to the priest to have it read aloud. What does one tell a farm about Versailles? You tell it, we may guess, about the food, about the fountains, which she has seen play twice. About the Queen of England, there is an exiled queen at this court, and the maid has seen her close enough to touch. About being well and warm and in good service. She will not try to describe the Hall of Mirrors. Some things you save to tell in person, in winter, by a farm fire, for the rest of your life. She signs it, folds it, sets it under the candlestick, and blows out her light, and that particular soft puff, repeated behind 10,000 doors from this attic to the town below, is the true sound of the Kingdom of France going to sleep. Not the cannon, not the trumpets, not the carillons, just breath meeting flame, 10,000 times until the dark is complete. It is past 1 o'clock now. The last attic candle is out. The letter sleeps under the candlestick. The maid sleeps under the king's roof. The king sleeps under his painted heaven. The valet at his feet. The guard at his door. The moon on all of them alike. On the lead roofs and the silver gardens and the still canal. High summer stars over France. The palace has finished becoming what it becomes for only a few hours in every 24. Not a capital, not a theatre, not a machine for glory, only the largest bedroom in the world. And out in the gardens, something is waiting for us that deserves the deepest hour of the night to be seen in. Take your candle. We are going down and out, through the little door in the north parterre, into the moonlight. The Gardens of Versailles by moonlight are the largest empty room in Europe. Step out through the little door and stand at the top of the great steps a moment, because the first sight of it wants stillness, 100 acres of geometry asleep under the moon. The parterres lie below like embroidery in silver thread, scrolls and knots of box hedge, drawn on the earth with a ruler, every leaf clipped to its place, and beyond them, the gravel walks run away in perfect perspective toward the black masses of the groves. And between the groves, the great central avenue descends, wide as a river, to the fountain of Apollo and the long canal beyond, which holds the moon tonight, the way a blade holds light. By day, this is the most visited, most imitated, most talked about garden on earth. By night, it belongs to the wind, the statues, and one gardener's boy, making his last round with a lantern, checking that the day's visitors have latched the gates of the groves behind them. And here is the great garden secret of Versailles, the one that delights everyone who learns it. The fountains you have heard about all your life, the 1,000 jets, the gods spouting rivers, the water theatres that astonish ambassadors are, most of the time, off. Even the Sun King cannot make enough water. The palace stands on a plateau with no great river. Every drop must be pumped, piped, coaxed uphill across miles of country by machines that are themselves among the wonders of the age. There is one on the Seine, said Sen, a monster of 14 wheels that all Europe comes to gape at, and even so, there is never enough. So the fountains play by rota, like everything else here. When the king walks the gardens, the fountaineers run ahead of him through hidden paths, whistling signals to one another, opening each fountain just before he rounds the corner, and closing it softly behind him, so that His Majesty moves all his life through a garden that appears to play everywhere, always a beautiful, laborious, perfectly Versailles solution. And at night, every valve in the garden is shut. The basins lie still. Walk down the moonlit steps and along the terrace to the nearest of them, the parterre pools, and look, water like black glass, the moon in it, a statue leaning over its own perfect reflection for the one audience, you, that will see it tonight. The silence where the water was is not an absence, it is a held breath. All those bronze throats, the frogs of Latona, said Latin O-H-Na, the horses of Apollo, the river gods reclining on their urns, silent together, resting, full of tomorrow's thunder. If you listen very closely at the rim of the great basin, you may hear the whole system breathing. A drip, somewhere under the stone, deep in the buried pipework. A slow seep in the reservoirs up the hill, the underground rooms where thousands of tons of water wait in the dark for morning, dreaming, if water dreams, of flying. The gravel under our feet is loud in all this hush, that fat, satisfying crunch, which is the signature sound of this garden. So step onto the grass verge and go softly down the great avenue between the walls of clipped trees. The groves open off the walk to left and right behind their gates and hedges. Little green theatres, ballrooms of turf, a colonnade of pink marble holding a circle of moonlight, each one a secret by day and doubly a secret now. In one of them a fountain has been left seeping just slightly, some fountaineer's small mercy or small oversight, and a thread of water slides over a bronze shell somewhere in the dark, with a sound so slight and so silver that it seems less heard than remembered. Stand a while by that gate. Of all the sounds we have collected together on all our nights, harbour water, mill streams, rain on inn roofs, this may be the smallest. One thread of water, escaping the ceremony, running for nobody, in the greatest garden in the world. The statues stand along the walks with the moon on their shoulders. Marble emperors, bronze gods, nymphs mid-turn by day, they are lesson and boast. By night they are simply company, a white population keeping perfectly still, and the night gardeners will tell you, not entirely joking, that walking here at 2 in the morning, you fall into the habit of greeting them. At the foot of the great avenue, the basin of Apollo spreads before us, and beyond it the canal begins, a mile and more of still water, cross-shaped, laid into the countryside like a mirror taken down from the hall and floated. On its bank, tied along a little quay, the strangest fleet in Europe rides at rest, for the king keeps ships here, on his garden canal, a miniature navy, gilded gondolas sent by Venice with their gondoliers, a little galley, model warships that fire tiny salutes on fete nights, all of them motionless now on their reflections, halyards ticking against toy masts in the small night wind, exactly like the harbour sounds we fell asleep to off the coast of a merchantman one night this spring. The gondoliers of Venice, by the way, sleep in the town, in a quarter that has come to be called Little Venice after them. They have brought their songs to the ponds of France, and on summer evenings when they row the court, their boat songs drift up the water and into every open window of the palace. Tonight they sleep, and the canal sings nothing, and the moon rides it from end to end without a ripple. Beyond the canal, the park runs out into true darkness, meadow, coppice, the deer asleep in their shadowy hundreds, the wall of the great hunting park 20 miles around, and at the edges of things you can feel what Versailles was before Versailles, the old marsh, the old woods, the ordinary French night that was here first, patient as ever, lapping at the edge of all this geometry. The two make peace at this hour. The wild night comes up to the last hedge, and the clipped night runs down to meet it, and the same moon does for both. Turn now and look back the way we came. Every visitor does it here. It cannot be helped. And take the night's greatest sight, the whole west front of the palace at the top of its terraces, a quarter mile of stone gone silver grey, 2,000 windows dark, the balustrades and urns and trophies along the roofline printed against the stars, and in all that sleeping cliff of a building, at its exact center, one window lit. You know whose it is. We stood in that room. The night candle by the great bed, seen from a mile away down the axis of the world, is a single warm point in the silver, no brighter than a low star, and every gardener, guard, courier and kitchen boy who crosses these gardens at night steers by it without thinking, the way sailors steer by the lamp of a lighthouse we once kept together. The palace is a dark ship on a dark sea, and that is the masthead light. On the way back up the avenue, we pass below the Orangery, the great vaulted gallery beneath the south terrace, where 1,200 orange trees in silver tubs spend their winters, and where, on a mild spring night like this, the earliest ones stand out of doors already on the parterre, sleeping in rows like docile green beasts, breathing their blossom into the dark. The scent pools along the south wall, unreasonably sweet, the smell of a latitude this country does not possess, purchased and pampered into being by the same will that pumps the rivers uphill. The night watchman of the Orangery, there is one. Of course there is one. This palace has a watchman for its orange trees, sits by the door of the vaults with his lantern turned low, and he alone of everyone we have met tonight is awake on purpose with nothing to do but smell orange blossom until dawn. There are worse posts in the king's service. And so back up the silver steps, with the blossom behind us and the gravel hushing under the grass at our feet, and the great dark palace rising to meet us window by window. And as we come up the last flight onto the terrace, the clock over the marble courtyard, the palace's oldest, from the hunting lodge days, clears its bronze throat and tells the sleeping kingdom, with no listener but us and the sentries and the statues, that it is 2 o'clock in the morning, the deepest chamber of the night. And even now, especially now, the palace is not quite empty of the waking. Scattered through the dark buildings, a dozen souls are up and about their offices, and their small hour belongs to them alone. Come and meet the 2 o'clock people of Versailles. The 2 o'clock people of Versailles know one another the way lighthouse keepers on facing headlands know one another, by light and habit rather than by conversation. Cross the dark forecourt toward the stables, 2 vast crescents of buildings facing the palace across the square, the great stables and the small stables, though nobody can tell you which is which without smiling, since both are enormous, and you enter the warm straw world we visited at the coaching inn, multiplied by 100. Here sleep the king's horses, hundreds upon hundreds of them, carriage teams and hunters, and the pale riding school horses that dance under chandeliers, each in its stall under its blanket. And the long aisles at this hour are one warm tide of breathing, that deep, patient, tidal sound we agreed, one rainy night at the White Hart, might be the best sleeping sound in all the world. A groom of the night watch dozes upright on a stool with his back against a post, waking every quarter hour by pure habit to walk his aisle. A nose here, a hoof there, a blanket corner twitched straight and back to the stool. Above the stalls, in the lofts, sleep the pages of the stable's noble boys sent here to learn horsemanship and manners, the naughtiest population of the palace by universal agreement, dreaming their riding school dreams. And in the farrier's shop at the end of the aisle, the banked forge breathes its rose-red breath over the anvil, and tomorrow's horseshoes hang in their rows, and the whole crescent smells of straw, leather, smoke, and horse, a smell that has not changed since Nineveh and will not change while horses and people keep company. Across the yard, a single window burns in the clock pavilion, the palace clockmaker's man sitting up with a sick clock. Versailles runs on its clocks, the king's day is cut to the minute, and a palace clock that loses time is a small state crisis. So somewhere in the building there is always a lamp like this one, a bench of tiny tools, a man in spectacles fishing a worn pinion out of a brass heart, while the patient hangs open-faced before him, pendulum still, and all its sister clocks tick on without it in the dark rooms. He will have it right by morning, he always does. And at 7, when the palace's 100 dials speak together, no one will know that one of them nearly overslept. Under the north wing, the night bakers are at the second proving palace bread, like inn bread, like village bread, rises while its eaters sleep. Some laws hold from cottage to crown. The night courier from Paris comes in at a quiet trot past the gate lanterns, dispatch bag sealed for the morning council. He hands it through the wicket to the officer of the post, shares 2 sentences of news and a cup of what the guardroom has, turns his horse loose to the ostler's boy, and is asleep in the courier's room within the quarter hour, boots by the bed, spurs still warm. In the chapel, the newest wonder of the palace, its stones still pale, consecrated hardly 5 years, one small lamp burns before the altar, as it burns in every church in Christendom tonight. From this royal vault of white pillars, down to the smallest chapel in the smallest village we have ever walked through together, the same little flame, keeping the same watch, at the bottom of the same night. The sentries change on the hour, with a soft ceremony of passwords. The guard officer writes the 2 o'clock line in his register, the old formula, the finest sentence a night can produce, nothing to report. And that is the whole waking population of the greatest palace on earth. A dozen lamps, a dozen quiet trades, spaced through the dark buildings like the lit windows of a village strung along a valley, for that is the secret we have climbed all this way to find. At 2 in the morning, there are no palaces. There is only the old confederacy of the wakeful, the guard, the groom, the baker, the clockmaker, the watchman among the orange trees, the same dozen souls who were awake in the medieval village, and aboard the ship, and at the coaching inn, keeping the same faith under grander ceilings. Rank is a daytime invention. The night has only 2 estates, the sleeping and the watching are everywhere the same brotherhood, and they are well met tonight, and so are we. Let us go back indoors, out of the dew, and spend the deep middle of the night the way we have learned to spend it on this channel, lying still in the dark, listening to a great house from the inside of a bed. Any bed will lend itself to us tonight, say, a courtier's, in one of the sought-after apartments of the north wing. These rooms are the paradox of Versailles that every memoirist writes home about, the most coveted lodgings in France and among the least comfortable. Grand families who own chateaux with 60 rooms scheme for years to be granted 3 low rooms and a closet under the palace roof with a smoking chimney and a view of a light well, because the 3 rooms are here, and here is everything. An apartment at Versailles means you exist. So the great sleep gladly in small rooms, their plate and their portraits crowded around them like passengers' luggage. And tonight, from a warm bed in one of them, the palace sounds like this. The fire, first banked, screened, ticking as it settles, throwing one thin blade of rose light across the ceiling through the gap in the screen. The paneling, answering the fire's warmth with its own small conversation of creaks. The draught under the door, drawing its long thread of cooler air across the room. Every door at Versailles has its draught. The courtiers call the corridors windy streets, and carrying with it the whole night smell of the palace. Cold marble, warm wax, wood smoke, and the ghost of the evening's powder and orange water. Through the wall on one side, the neighbor's clock, a half-beat behind your own, the 2 of them ticking in and out of step all night in that slow braid we have listened to before. Through the wall on the other side, very faintly, a flute. Someone's younger son, home late from the evening party, with a tune caught in his head like a burr, playing it once, twice, softening, giving it up mid-phrase as sleep takes him and the phrase hangs unfinished in the dark for you to complete, forever, any way you like. Farther off, muffled by 3 rooms and a gallery, the palace's structural sounds, a shutter somewhere testing its bar in the wind, the long tick of the parquet in the hall of mirrors cooling board by board, the sigh of air down a dead chimney, and under it all, at the very floor of hearing, the sound that is not quite a sound, the fact of 10,000 sleepers. You cannot hear them breathe, not truly, through this much stone, and yet a full house transmits its fullness somehow through the very timbers. And anyone who has slept in a crowded inn or a barracks or a ship knows the difference in the darkness between an empty building and a laden one. This one is laden like a granary in October, dukes 2 doors down, kitchen boys in the far attics, an exiled queen in the wing across the marble court, whose sorrows even this channel will not disturb tonight. May she sleep the sweetest of anyone. The little dog in the king's room, chasing something small and glorious across a dream parterre, and the king himself at the center, the still point of the whole vast wheel sleeping, the memoirists tell us, remarkably well, all his life, in every weather of fortune. Whatever else history will say of him, he could always sleep, and there is something almost holy about the sleep of a man with that much to keep him awake. The bed you and I have borrowed is a good one, a court bed, feather over horsehair, warmed an hour ago by a chambermaid's pan, the curtains drawn on 3 sides making the small room within the room that people of this age love, the bed as little house, as anchored boat, as burrow. The pillow smells faintly of lavender from the linen presses. Rest here, nothing is required of you. In a moment we will talk, drowsily, the way we do in the small hours, about candles. This palace burns a fortune in them nightly, and the story of where they all come from and where the ends go is a perfect 2 in the morning story, all soft numbers and small corruptions, but there is no hurry. The flute has stopped, the clocks braid on. The draught draws its thread under the door, the fire ticks behind its screen, and the greatest house in the world lies around this bed in rings, room, wing, palace, garden, park, France like ripples around a dropped pebble, all of them settling, all of them still. Now, as promised, the candle story, told low for the deep of the night. Everything you have seen glowing tonight, the chandeliers of the evening party, the tapers of the coucher, the night lights in the guardrooms, is money burning, and not small money. A good white wax candle, the kind the staterooms burn, costs more than a labourer earns in a day, and the palace on a great evening burns them by the 1,000. The accounts of the royal household for everything here is accounted, down to the last wick set aside for wax alone, each year a sum that would build and endow a parish church, and the courtiers joke carefully that the Sun King's true rival is not any foreign prince but the night itself, which he beats back nightly at ruinous expense, and which always patiently returns for the next engagement. The candles have their own officers, this will not surprise you by now, a whole department of the wax which orders, stores, issues, and above all counts. Every room of consequence has its nightly allowance, fixed by rank and custom. So many candles of such a weight to a duchess's apartment, so many to a minister's desk, down to the single tallow dip allowed the boy who sleeps by the linen press door. Rank at Versailles is measured in light. You can walk the corridors at 10 o'clock and read the whole hierarchy of France in the brightness under the doors. And then there is the loveliest rule of all, the one that keeps half the household warm in its favor. A candle once lit in the king's service is never lit twice. Whatever remains at the end of the evening, and on ceremony nights, whole forests of candles are barely burned an inch, becomes a perquisite, a right, of the servants of each department. The candle ends of Versailles are a currency, a wage, an economy in themselves, gathered, weighed, shared by strict seniority, sold on to the chandlers and shopkeepers of the town, until half the parlours of the district glow at one remove with the king's light. A chambermaid's marriage portion may be years of candle ends. The first valet's perquisites of wax alone are worth more than a country lawyer's practice. The pamphleteers call it waste. The household calls it the way of the house, and you and I, drowsing here in the dark, may simply call it what it looks like from a warm bed, light flowing downhill from the throne to the town, like water finding its way from the reservoirs down to the smallest fountain. And while we are at it, the water has its officers too, and its own nightly economy, the carriers who fill the cisterns before dawn, the fountain men who will walk the buried pipes at first light, listening for leaks with an iron rod pressed to the ear like a physician sounding a chest. And the fires have their economy, the woodmen's carts that will creak in from the park with tomorrow's fuel while the palace still sleeps, oak for the staterooms, beech for the kitchens, faggots for the attics, every log of it counted, every ashpan's cinders sifted and the good coals saved. Nothing in this house burns, flows or shines without being somebody's living. That is the deepest truth of Versailles, and it is a warm one to fall asleep against. The palace looks from outside like one man's impossible dream, and it is. But a dream to stay standing must employ 10,000 people to dream it in shifts, and every one of them is paid in coin or bread or candle ends or honor, and every one of them is asleep around you now, except the dozen watchers we have met and befriended. The clock in the marble court strikes 3, and the strike goes out over the roofs and the gardens and is answered, a breath later, by the town churches, and then by something much farther away, a dog perhaps, at a farm out beyond the park wall, in the old France that was here first. 3 o'clock at Versailles, 3 o'clock everywhere. The candle by the king's bed has burned to its last third, as it does every night at this hour. The valet, without waking, knows it by the color of the light through his eyelids. The night is past its summit now and beginning very slowly the long descent toward morning. Sleep through the descent. You have earned it. You have been awake with the watchers half the night. The next thing we shall hear together, if you are still listening, is the first cart on the cobbles. But that is hours away yet, whole, soft, dark hours, and the bed is warm, and the curtains are drawn, and the house holds. If you are still drifting with me, let the palace show you its year, because a house this size does not have one night. It has a wheel of nights, turning through the seasons, and tonight's mild spring dark is only one spoke of it. In high summer, the court lives half out of doors, the fountains play late for festivals, the gondolas go out on the canal with musicians in the bows, and the boat songs of the Venetians cross the water in the dusk, while the heat of the day breathes back out of the gravel walks. On those nights the palace goes to bed with its windows open, and the gardens come indoors on the air nightingales in the groves. The smell of clipped box and warm stone, moths at every candle, and the guard on the terrace walks his round in shirt-sleeves under enormous soft stars. In autumn the court hunts, and the night smell of rain and horses. The king, who has hunted since boyhood and will hunt from a little carriage when his legs fail him, comes in at dusk, mud-splashed and content, and the stables steam, and the chimneys are lit floor by floor as the cold comes down, and the palace begins its long winter conversation with its 1,200 fireplaces. And winter at Versailles is the great test, the season the memoirists never forgive. This palace of glass and marble was built for show, not snugness. The fires roar, and the vast rooms swallow the heat whole. The draughts run the corridors like tides. There are famous frozen nights when the wine sets solid in the carafes on the king's own table, and the ink freezes on the ministers' pens, and the whole 10,000 sleep in their cloaks, and the water carriers break ice in the courtyard fountains at dawn. On such nights, the attics, for once, have the best of it. Small rooms warm quickest, and the kitchen boys on the warm bricks of the grand Commun sleep better than the dukes in their gilded beds, and know it, and say nothing. But winter is also the season of the palace's greatest indoor glories. The state balls in the Hall of Mirrors, with 3,000 candles doubled to 6,000 in the glass. The season of chocolate, the new drink, fetched hot up the back stairs at all hours. And Christmas, when the chapel blazes for the midnight offices and the massed voices of the king's musicians rise up through the cold stone like warmth itself, and the whole vast house, for one night, is organized not around the throne, but around a manger, the mightiest house in Europe, bending with real tenderness to the smallest bed in the story. And then the wheel turns, and it is spring again, and tonight again. The orange trees carried blinking out of their vaults, the first warm dark, the gardens forgiven their winter, and the year's first night, this night, when the palace sleeps with the windows unlatched and the blossom coming in. The wheel will keep turning. That is what it is for. Long after this king, say it softly. Even the night knows it. Long after this king, the wheel turns. Other bedtimes at the center of the world, other candles, other names spoken over other candlesticks, and then no candlesticks at all, and the fountains playing for everyone, and children of every nation running down the great avenue where we walked alone tonight. The palace has already outlived its marsh and its lodge. It will outlive its age. That is what stone and habit do together. But the nights will always be like this one. Whatever flag is on the roof, the dark will come up the great avenue at dusk. The windows will go out one by one. Some keeper will walk some round with some lamp, and the house will lie under the moon, breathing slowly, 10,000 sleeps folded inside it, the way it breathes around us now. We have nearly finished our night. Away east beyond Paris, the sky has not changed yet, but it is thinking about changing. The deepest cold of the night is on the gardens. The deer in the park are folded in their hollows. The last of the moon is in the Canal. And down in the grand Commun, in the biggest kitchen, a boy who was a scullion, asleep on warm bricks 2 hours ago, is awake, yawning like a cathedral door, lighting a spill from the banked fire, because in this house, as in every house we have ever kept a night in together, the day does not begin with the master. It begins with a servant and a flame and a hearth. Before the night descends toward morning, there are rooms we have not visited, and the deep hours are the time for them, beginning with the one place in the palace where music sleeps. The king's musicians are, by any reckoning, the finest establishment of sound in Europe. The chapel choir, the 24 violins, the oboists and trumpeters, and the great organ in its new white loft. By day and evening they are everywhere. Mass, supper, the evening party, the very fireworks have their orchestra, but now their instruments lie in the music rooms in the dark, and a sleeping instrument is a peaceful thing to stand among. The violins in their cases, ranked like a dormitory of schoolboys, the great bass viols under their covers, the harpsichords with their lids down over all that quilled thunder, and on their painted inner lids, invisible now, the little gilded mottos about music and time. The organ upstairs in the chapel holds its breath all night, thousands of pipes, from pencil size to tree size, full of nothing but the cold stone air, waiting. When the bellows boys tread it awake tomorrow, the first chord will roll down the white pillars like warm weather arriving. And in a drawer in the music library, under the copyists' weights, tomorrow's music sleeps too, parts still wet-edged from the evening's ruling and pricking, a new air for the chapel by the old master who has served this king since they both were young. The nightingales in the groves, someone once told the king, are the only musicians at Versailles who play without pay or ceremony. And the king, they say, took the point kindly. Down a floor and along the marble gallery, a lamp burns where you might not expect one. The apothecary's room, off the courtyard of the offices, shelves of white jars with blue script syrups, cordials, barks and waters, the scales under their glass bell, the pill tiles washed and leaning. The palace doctors are great men and sleep in good rooms, but the apothecary's assistant sleeps here on a settle among his jars, because a palace of 10,000 souls is never entirely without a toothache, a colic, a feverish child in the attics, a dowager who cannot sleep and insists upon her orange flower water warmed just so. He is the night pharmacy of a small city, this drowsing young man, and the row of labelled comforts above his head is the gentlest arsenal in France. Once or twice in a night, the bell over his door will turn softly on its spring, a maid with a candle, a whispered errand, a jar taken down, a spoonful measured, and then the room folds itself back to sleep, smelling of rosemary, wax, and syrup of violets. And what of the king's own sleep, you ask? Does the centre of the world never lie awake at 3 in the morning like the rest of us? He does. Even the sun has its wakeful nights, and the household is provisioned for them as it is provision for everything. There is a reader of the chamber, an office of honour, a gentleman with a good voice, who can be summoned in his dressing gown at any black hour to sit by the great bed with one candle and read history mostly. The king likes history. He is, after all, leaning against a great deal of it. There are the memoirs he sometimes dictates of his own long reign for the instruction of the great-grandson asleep in the nursery wing, who must someday do all this in his turn. And there is the oldest remedy of all, the one this channel practices nightly, the ordered house itself. A king who cannot sleep at Versailles can lie in the dark and hear his kingdom being kept at the sentry's heels, the quarter strike, the valet's breathing, the fire's tick, the whole vast machine turning gently around him like a mill wheel in a slow stream, and be carried down by it. It is said he once told his physician that he never truly feared wakefulness, for the night at Versailles was so well kept that lying awake in it was itself a kind of rest. Whether he said it or not, you and I know tonight exactly what he meant. There is a wing of this palace where the candles burn latest and the dreams are all of paper, the minister's wing along the front courtyard where France is administered. The great offices sleep here above their own archives: war, marine, the royal household, foreign affairs, floor upon floor of green boxes and pigeonholes, the correspondence of a kingdom folded and docketed and bound in tape, treaties sleeping beside tide tables, the muster rolls of regiments asleep beside the accounts of the king's buildings. A young clerk of the marine has the night duty this week. He sits in a pool of candlelight amid an acreage of dark desks, copying fair a dispatch that must go north with the morning courier, his pen scratching in the enormous silence like a mouse in a granary. Around him in the boxes sleeps the whole busy world, harvests and harbours, ambassadors' whispers, the price of wheat in 20 provinces, the slow correspondence of cardinals. It is strange and soothing to stand in the dark aisles and think that most of what governments do in any age is exactly this: writing things down, filing them, letting them sleep, and that the boxes outlast everything: the clerk, the minister, the king, the age. Historians 3 centuries from tonight will open these very folders, break these very seals, softened tonight by this very candle, and meet this same quiet room on the other side of time. The clerk sands his page, stretches until his chair creaks, and permits himself the night clerk's immemorial reward: bread, cheese, and the last of the guardroom's wine, eaten slowly at midnight among the affairs of Europe. Sleep is different again in the nursery wing, where the future sleeps under a night lamp. The king's great-grandson, a small boy now, who will be a king someday, poor lamb, sleeps in a warm, ordered room with his governesses in the chambers alongside, his toy soldiers garrisoned on the shelf, his little dog at the bed foot in imitation of his great-grandfather's, though nobody has told him so. Down in the town, past the gates, the other Versailles sleeps too. The town the palace called into being out of nothing, street by street innkeepers and wig-makers, sedan chairmen and laundresses, the whole population that lives by the court as a port lives by the sea. The laundries along their ponds, where the linen of 10,000 people is boiled and beaten and bleached in cycles as fixed as the tides. the inn-yards full of the coaches of yesterday's petitioners, the lodgings where visiting philosophers and place-seekers and portrait painters lie tonight, rehearsing tomorrow's bows against the ceiling. Little Venice by the Canal head, where the gondoliers sleep their watery sleep. A town wholly invented, wholly dependent, and by now wholly real children born in it, grandmothers buried from it the way a harbour town is real, though the sea made it. And in all these beds, palace and town, master and servant, the sleep itself is the old sleep we learned about in the medieval village, the sleep in 2 acts, the first sleep taken early and deep, then the quiet waking in the middle dark an hour, maybe more, when people lie warm and unbothered, thinking long thoughts, murmuring to a bedfellow, saying a prayer, hearing the quarter strikes pass, and then the second sleep, softer, carrying them down to morning. All over this hill, at this hour, thousands are in that gentle between sleep now. The chambermaid recalling her letter, the old marquis reliving minute by minute the weight of 2 branches of flame, the clerk's candle out at last, and the clerk between sleeps already composing tomorrow's copy in his head. Even perhaps the king, surfacing briefly in the great bed to hear the 3/4 strike and the valet's breathing, and finding all well and going down again. Nobody in this whole sleeping kingdom calls the middle waking a problem or lies fretting that they have failed at sleep. It is simply the night's own pause, old as firelight. If you are in yours now, listener, keep company with them all and let the second sleep come when it likes. It knows the way. It has been finding people on this hill, and on every hill, for as long as there have been beds. 2 more places belong to this night, and both lie away from the great house, out in the dark of the park, and both are kinds of dream the palace keeps at arm's length. The first is the Menagerie, at the southern arm of the canal, a little octagonal pavilion with radiating courts, where the king keeps the creatures of the wide world, birds mostly, and gentle beasts, cranes and pelicans and flamingos the colour of dawn, an ostrich that is the wonder of visiting children, doves of every nation, and in their season stranger guests that ambassadors bring for. What do you give the man who has France? You give him a camel. By day the court rows down the canal to marvel and feed the cranes from gilded barges, but now at the bottom of the night the Menagerie is its own small sovereign country of sleep. The flamingos one-legged in their shallows like folded parasols, heads under wings, the cranes standing their strange sentry sleep among the reeds, one eye opening now and then out of ancient habit, finding France, closing again. The doves a soft grey murmuring in their coats when the wind moves. The ostrich a great absurd tender heap in its straw. The keeper's lamp burns low in the pavilion window. He is the loneliest of the palace's night brotherhood, and, he would tell you, the luckiest. No ceremony reaches here, no rank, only the lap of the canal against the landing steps and the small sounds of far-travelled creatures sleeping safe, further from home than anyone at Versailles and past minding it. The second place is newer and quieter still, the Trianon, said Trianon, the king's garden palace of pink marble at the park's northern edge, a single story of pillars and porcelain-white rooms set down among flower beds built, the whole world knows, as the palace's opposite. Versailles is for the 10,000, the Trianon is for a dozen. Versailles is ceremony, the Trianon is supper without footmen, low voices, the smell of tuberoses and wet earth through open doors. The flower beds here are legendary. They are replanted overnight, whole parterres lifted and reset by lantern light, while the house sleeps, so that the king may walk out of a morning into a garden that has changed colour like a dream. Anemones where the tulips were, the scent rearranged, and not a spade mark showing. And that work is happening now, the only industry we shall see in all the park tonight. A dozen gardeners moving down the beds with shaded lanterns, kneeling, lifting, setting, firming, murmuring to each other in the dark, planting a surprise. There is nothing quite like it anywhere else on earth. The mightiest monarchy in Christendom, at 3 in the morning, on its knees in the dirt, arranging flowers so that one old man may be briefly, freshly delighted before breakfast. If you would keep one picture of Versailles from our whole night, you could do far worse than this one. Walk back now, the long way, up the side of the canal. The moon is low. The water has gone from silver to pewter. A fish touches the surface once, far out, and the ring widens and travels and fades against the stone lip with the smallest sound this garden owns. Ahead, the palace rises again on its terraces, vast and grey and sleeping, our one lit window still burning at the centre. You find it now without looking for it, the way the Night Brotherhood do. Down here by the water it is possible to feel a great tenderness for the whole improbable place, for the marsh it was, for the machine it is, for the museum it will be, for the 10,000 asleep in its ribs who did not choose the age they serve any more than we chose ours, for the old man in the great bed who has never once in his life been alone, sleeping at the center of the light he made. History will have its long say about all of this, and must. But history is a daytime business. The night's verdict is simpler, and it is the one this channel exists to deliver. They were people. They were tired. They slept. The cranes stand sentry. The gardeners plant the morning surprise. The clock over the marble court gathers itself and strikes 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. And the strikes drift out over the water to where we stand, and pass us, and go on into the park. And the night receives them, as it has received everything, gently. 4 o'clock at Versailles is the hinge of the dark, the hour that belongs to no one, after the last of the night people have settled, and before the first of the morning people stir, and it is the right hour for the quietest story we have saved, the story of what this house dreams. Every house dreams. We have said so on other nights, in other beds. A cottage dreams of the harvest, a ship dreams of landfall, an inn dreams of full stables and fair roads. What does Versailles dream of, in the deep of the night, with its 2,000 dark windows? It dreams first of water. Of course it does. Under the gardens the buried pipes run for miles, and the reservoirs on the heights sit brimmed and waiting, and somewhere in the system all night there is that faint seep and tick and drip we heard at the basin's rim, the palace's water dream, the dream of tomorrow's 1,000 jets, rehearsed drop by drop in the dark. It dreams of light, all those chandeliers hanging dark and glittering, every lustre holding a memory of flame the way a shell holds the sea. The wax in the storerooms, tons of it, white and sleeping, tomorrow's brilliance in bales. It dreams in fabric the looms of lion asleep tonight, 200 miles south. Mid-thread in silks the palace has already ordered for hangings not yet sewn, so that part of this house's future is strung, half-woven, across the dark of another city. It dreams in marble not yet quarried and avenues not yet planted for the king. Near 70 still builds. The plans for new wings and new gardens lie rolled in the drawing office, and the palace, like its master, has never once believed itself finished. And it dreams backward too, the way old houses do. Somewhere in its stones the little hunting lodge is still here actually, literally here. The old brick core is buried at the heart of the marble courtyard like a seed in an apple, and on the oldest nights, when the wind comes off the woods smelling of leaf mold and rain, the palace remembers being small. A lodge with a fire and a courtyard, dogs asleep by the hearth, a king who came here precisely to be unimportant. Every palace begins as somebody's hiding place. The grandest address in Europe grew from the one spot where a shy king's father could hear owls instead of petitions. There is a lesson in that suited to 4 in the morning, and it is this. All the gold downstairs, every acre of mirror and marble, all the ceremony we have watched tonight, the supper, the candlestick, the 100 men at a bedtime, all of it is, at root, an enormous elaboration of the simplest wishes there are. To be warm, to be safe, to be looked after as the dark comes down, to have someone hold the light while you fall asleep. Kings need it in state, kitchen boys need it on warm bricks. You need it wherever you are lying now, and the whole art of Versailles, the only part of its art that was ever truly necessary, is the art this channel has been collecting from the beginning, the keeping of the night. The rest is decoration, beautiful, absurd, unrepeatable decoration, but the flame at the middle of it is the same flame that burned in the village hearth under its ash blanket, and in the binnacle lamp on the dark Atlantic, and in the arch lantern of the White Hart in the rain. We have carried that flame from house to house all year, you and I. Tonight we carried it through the biggest house there is, and found it just the same. The clock's 4 strikes have long since faded. The gardeners at the Trianon are gathering their tools. The cranes have both eyes shut. In the great bed at the center of the world, the Sun King sleeps on toward his 7 o'clock. And in the small bed at the center of your world, you are sleeping too, or nearly, or next to it. And either way, the night is holding and will hold. Stay where you are. There is nothing further to see that cannot be seen drowsing. The last hours before a great house wakes are the softest it owns, and they are all still ahead of us, unhurried, warm, and kept. Let us drift back through the sleeping staterooms one more time, because by night they tell a story they never tell by day. The grand apartment is a procession of salons named for the planets: the room of Venus, the room of Mars, the room of Mercury, the room of Apollo, a solar system of ceilings through which the court orbits nightly. And walking them now, dark and empty, you walk the sky itself with a single candle. Painted gods dim overhead, your small flame sliding across marble the color of night water, your own reflection keeping pace with you in the black windows like a polite ghost. In the room of Mercury stands a bed of state, behind its rail, a bed nobody sleeps in, kept perpetually made, perpetually saluted, a throne in the shape of sleep itself. The pages bow to it as they pass with their candles, and there is something wonderfully fitting in that. Of all the things a palace could enthrone, this one enthrones rest. The furniture of these rooms was once famously silver, actual silver. Tables, benches, orange tubs, candle stands, a whole treasury cast into furniture to stun the ambassadors, and the old servants can still point to where each piece stood, for the king sent it all to the mint years ago, in the hard winters of the wars, to be melted into coin for bread and soldiers' pay. The courtiers mourned the glitter. The kingdom ate. The rooms are furnished now in carved wood and brocade, warmer to the eye and honester to the hand, and at night you cannot tell the difference anyway. Candlelight makes silver of anything. The paintings sleep on the walls, Caesars and saints and sea battles, the king young on horseback, forever 25 in a wind that never drops, and below them in the window bays, the shutters hold their bars like folded arms. In the guardroom at the head of the marble stair, the night detail sits around a shaded lantern. Cloaks, cards laid face down mid-game, a kettle at the fire's edge. The ancient economy of men keeping the small hours, everywhere low talk, long pauses, the password of the night kept under their tongues like a coin. The passwords change nightly and are chosen by old custom from the names of saints and towns. Tonight it is a little southern town no one present has ever seen, and the sentries have been murmuring it to each other at the relieving of posts all night, handing the name of a sleepy, sun-baked place from mouth to mouth through the dark of the grandest building in Europe, like a pressed flower passed around a winter room. Below stairs, the last industry of the ceremonial day is ending, in the silver vaults. The plate of tonight's grand supper, the dishes and covers and basins we watched go by in procession, has been counted back piece by piece into its baize-lined presses by the officers of the goldsmith service, each piece wiped, weighed, entered in the ledger, locked behind 3 locks whose 3 keys sleep in 3 different rooms. The great napery is folded into its presses. The tablecloth of blinding white is already in the laundry's keeping. The little square table at which the king ate before 100 watchers is folded against a wall in an anteroom, looking now like what it always secretly was, a plain, sturdy, folding table, cousin to every trestle in every inn we have ever slept above. Ceremony at the end of the night is stacked neatly and put away like anything else. That may be the kindest thing the dark does in this house. It off-duties everything. The throne room is just a room. The bed of state is just a bed. The gods on the ceilings are just paint, resting, and the king behind his guarded door is just a sleeping man of 66, whose feet ache from the gravel walks, whose great wig waits on its stand like a spaniel, and whose last thought before sleep the memoirist never recorded, so it is ours to imagine, and we will imagine it gently, may have been nothing grander than tomorrow's weather for the hunting, or the taste of the soup at supper, or the face of a friend dead 30 years, or nothing at all, the blessed nothing at the bottom of the stairs of sleep, which is the same nothing for kings and kitchen boys, and toward which, listener, you are yourself now well descended. One last climb for the view that crowns every night we have ever kept together, the roof. Up the attic stair, past the sleeping corridor, through a low door with a stiff latch, and out onto the leads, the high lead-sheeted walkways that run among the roofs of Versailles like paths among grey hills. Mind the step up, hold the iron rail. The night air at this height is clean and cold and smells of dew on metal. And there it all is. The roofscape of the palace spreads around us, acre upon acre of slate and lead, ridged and valleyed like a country of its own. The forest of chimney stacks, hundreds of them, every one the top of some fire we have watched bank tonight, a few still breathing their last warm threads straight up into the still air. The gilded trophies and urns along the balustrades, holding starlight on their dull gold. The great roof of the chapel riding above everything to the north like a ship's stern castle. Below and before us the gardens run out silver to the black park. The canal lies in its cross of pale water. The town sleeps at the gates in its huddle of roofs. One late lamp down there in a back street, a doctor's, a mother's, somebody's small 3 in the morning burning its private vigil in step with all the others we have known. And beyond everything, in every direction, France, dark, enormous, patient. Field folded on field, 20 million sleepers breathing under this one sky, parish by parish, all the villages we have walked and all the ones we never will, each with its bell and its baker and its banked hearths, running out to the rims of the night. From up here the palace's own hugeness is finally humbled into scale. It is one bright stitch in a dark cloth that goes on forever. The wind up here is the same wind that crossed the attic tiles and hummed in the chimney stacks, a slow river of night air off the woods, combing the roof ridges, carrying one bat past the chapel roof and away. Lean on the rail, it is stout, and take the night census one last time, from the top. The king, asleep, his candle burning, his valet at his feet. The court, asleep in its gilded drawers and attic boxes, ambition itself gone under for 6 hours. The kitchens, banked, the stables, breathing, the gardens, black glass and silver gravel, the watch, awake down there at the gate, and there along the terrace, and there in the window of the orangery vaults, each little light holding its few yards of the dark, and all the lights together holding the whole, the same strung lights we saw down the Bristol road from the inn gallery, the same chain that has held every night of every episode, and holds tonight. Nothing to report, from one end of the kingdom to the other. It is the deepest hour now. Even the wind is slowing. The stars have wheeled as far west as they go before the east unstitches them, and the last of the moon is caught in the canal like a coin in a well. Come down from the roof softly, latch the low door, down the attic stair past the doors and their chalked names, down and down through the warm dark layers of the sleeping house attic, apartment, gallery, guardroom, each floor a shade warmer, each a shade darker, like descending into a feather bed the size of a palace, and settle again where we began the descent of the night, behind the bed curtains in the borrowed room, in the small warm country of the bed. The fire is one red scene behind its screen, the clocks braid on, yours and the neighbours, in step and out. Far away and directly below and all around, Versailles holds its 10,000 sleeps in its stone arms without effort, as it will hold 10,000 more tomorrow, and did yesterday, and on nights beyond counting, each one carried safely from dusk to dawn by candles and quiet people, and not one of them, until tonight, ever watched all the way through by anyone who thought to tell it. Now one has been. It is yours now. Keep it somewhere warm, and let the great house do for you these last hours what it does for everyone under its roofs tonight, prince and page and traveller alike. Hold still, stay dark, keep the one light burning, and ask nothing of you at all until morning. The waking of Versailles runs upward from the kitchens and downward from the sky, and the two dawns meet somewhere on the first floor around 7 o'clock. The kitchen boy's spill becomes a fire. The fire wakes the cook's hearths one by one down the vaulted line. The bakers draw the night's bread, and the smell climbs the stairwells of the grand Commun like a kindly rumour, opening doors as it goes. The water carts come in from the reservoirs, the woodmen's carts from the park, the first farm carts to the palace gates with salad and cream and eggs from the village's iron tyres on cobbles, that oldest of morning sounds, the same in this royal forecourt as in every market square we have ever woken to. The maids come down the attic stairs with their pails. The shutters of the ground floor begin to clatter back. The gardeners are out before the sun with their rakes, erasing our footprints, yours and mine, from the gravel of the great avenue, restoring the perfection that the night is permitted to disturb and the day is not. The fountain men walk their pipes, the sentries change for the last time, grey-faced and cheerful, and the guard officer rules off the night's page, nothing to report, signed, dated, filed among 10,000 identical mornings, the great ledger of nothing going wrong that is the truest history of any well-kept house. And at 7:15, in the small gilded room at the centre of everything, the ceremony that closes our story begins, because the king's day starts as his night ended, in public, in order, by candlelight going out instead of coming on. This is the lever, said Louis XIV, the rising, the mirror image of the coucher we watched 12 hours ago. The first valet wakes first, folds his cot away, opens the inner shutters, so that the young light falls across the parquet to the foot of the great bed. The fire is fed, the little dog is let out to the terrace, and then, at the appointed minute, the first entry, the most privileged of the court, admitted softly to the chamber to be present while the king wakes, is washed, is shaved, is dressed, the nightshirt passed back down the same chain of honour by which it arrived, the day shirt passed up it, the same faces from last night, the same rail, the same bed saluted, and on the side table, cold now, its two branches trailing a morning ghost of smoke when the valet carries it away, the candlestick, its night's work done. Nobody looks at it this morning. Tonight 100 men will pretend not to. So the wheel comes round entire, and our watch is over. Through the tall windows, the gardens are filling with gold. The first fountains cough, consider, and climb into the sunlight for the morning's visitors. The avenue we walked alone is already crunching underfoot with the day's first petitioners and architects and ambassadors, all of them hurrying toward the palace that has, as far as any of them will ever know, simply been here, blazing and effortless all along. Only you and I and the night shift, asleep now above the kitchens with their boots by their beds, know what it cost to carry this house through the dark. The counted candles, the banked fires, the register with its beautiful nothing, the guard's heels down the hall of mirrors, the thread of water running for nobody, the letter under the candlestick in the attic, and one flame kept burning at the center of the world while the world turned over in its sleep. That is what we came for, and we have it now to keep. The greatest palace ever built needs exactly what a village needs, what a ship needs, what an inn needs, what you need. Someone to hold the candle while sleep comes. Tonight, for 10,000 people, someone did. Someone always has. Someone is holding it now for you, if you like, these last few minutes. Consider it held. Our borrowed bed is warm. There is no reason to leave it. Morning at Versailles can happen perfectly well without us, and will. The rest of this night is yours, and the rain of light through the shutters is hours away, yet where you are lying. Sleep well. The palace is minding the night, and the last candle at Versailles, the one that is never put out, burns on. And if you are still drifting, stay for one more round of the palace, slower now, with no more history in it, only the night itself, passing one last time, for no one but you. The golden gates, locked and lamplit, the sentry in his box with his cloak about him, the marble court, moon on the checkered stones, the old clock's hands folded toward the small hours, the hall of mirrors, 17 windows of moonlight lying still on the floor, the chandeliers asleep in their own glitter overhead, the guard's lantern, far down at the end, small as a firefly going away, the king's door, and the guard beside it, and beyond the door the little rose-lit country of the bedchamber, the banked fire, the sleeping valet, the dog twitching gently in its basket, the one candle, burning at the center of everything, tended by no one, sufficient, the back stairs breathing their draught, the attic corridor, all its doors dark now, the letter asleep under the candlestick, the cracked mirror holding what little light there is, the grand commune, red-eyed and warm, the boy on the bread oven bricks, the great coppers hanging like moons, the stables, and the long warm tide of the horses breathing in and out and in, the gardens, silver and still, the statues with the moon on their shoulders, the black glass of the basins holding their breath till morning, the one thread of water on the bronze shell running for nobody, the orange trees in their rows breathing blossom, the watchman among them, his lantern low, the canal, a bar of pale light, the little fleet asleep at its quay, the park beyond, and the deer folded in the dark, and the old France beyond the wall, field on field, asleep to the horizon. And over it all, the roofs of Versailles under the stars, lid and slate and gilded iron, 2,000 dark windows and one lit one small gold star at the center of the sleeping cliff, the last candle, burning, minding the night. Sleep well, the house is kept, the light is held. Good night. Sleep well, the palace is minding the night. The doors are locked. The last candle burns. Nothing to report from one end of the kingdom to the other. The fountains rest, the watch is kept. "10,000 sleeps, held in stone arms, till morning."